Okay, welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to have with us Marne Martin, CEO of Emburse, to today's event that is going to be titled The ROI of AI. Marne has over 25 years of technology experience. Before joining Emburse, Marne was for 5 years at IFS, where she was Chief Strategy Officer and President. And earlier, she also had many other leadership roles. For example, she was CEO of ServicePower PLC and CFO of Norcon PLC. Marne is a proud Hoya, holding a bachelor's degree in economics and international finance from SFS. And today's discussion is really about something that I believe is very important, very pressing, which is the ROI of AI. Now, the first wave of automation, during the first wave of automation, everyone always think about experimentation. And so experimentation was always prioritized over cost effectiveness. But a lot of businesses now are starting to struggle with questions that are very important around whether, for example, does it really make sense to invest in AI? What processes really benefit from AI? And when is it the case that the costs outweigh the potential gains? And how can you deal with this? Now, these are going to be the central questions of the day. Emburse had a recent piece of research that we're going to talk about throughout, but then of course we're going to rely on Marne's experience, 25 years of experience. But before we dive into Emburse, we're also going to have a very cool demo of what Emburse really does. But before we dive into this, I want to start to zoom out a little bit for a moment. Now, there is this very recent piece of research from Pew. So Pew Research just came out with a very interesting report. It was last month, and they were saying that this didn't used to be the case, but nowadays many Americans are very, very willing to have AI assist with their own tasks. Before, this was not the case. People were very skeptical. Now you start having that people are very eager and very relaxed about having the AI tool doing many tasks for them. So I just want to start from your vantage point. What do you make of this shift? How does this affect the future of AI, and how do you think this change in perspective from the users will affect how AI companies will evolve going forward?
So, first off, how many of you could ever imagine not having a mobile phone? Okay, we only got one in the back, and I think that he's probably, okay, two, but probably you're not totally telling the truth, okay? But can remember not having a mobile. Well, this is what I'm saying. So when I was a little girl growing up on cattle ranches in Montana, Wyoming, I remember, I think it was 1983 or 86, when my father gave me first really clunky computer, which now my mobile phone has way more compute power than that ever dreamed of. And then, of course, when I was graduating from Georgetown and thinking about my career, it was right when the first digital cell phones were starting. Okay, GSM was the first technology around the world that had digital encryption, and from that, mobile telephony came alongside the growth of the internet. When you think about how technology has grown, and I don't know if those of you in business or the business school, et cetera, have studied like crossing the chasm and really thinking about, again, economics, finance major, about competitive advantage and user behavior, and also how you grow markets. AI and technologies in general have the ability to embed themselves into everything that we do, how we live, how we work, how we build businesses. But they're also a business in and of itself. And to create a business based on a new technology, you have to have people willing to buy it and willing to use it. So AI started back in the 60s. In telco, a lot of the encryption, the fraud technologies, defense intelligence, et cetera. I think when I did my first trip and deal in China in also the early 2000s, I was very impressed. It was no surprise with DeepSeek and some of the other things, because even 20 years you could see that. But the perception, if you weren't an intelligence officer or you weren't dealing with fraud or certain types of, telco encryption or modeling traffic patterns, was that AI wasn't relevant to you, to us, okay? And I think this is the biggest change, per your point, Dr. Rossi, that has come to our world now post-OpenAI, is that whether you are excited about AI, fearful of AI, not sure about AI, I think more people are interested now in using it. It is becoming part of our everyday life. And OpenAI, even though I think we'll see how long their dominance survives in true LLMs. I think that's actually an interesting discussion topic of itself. But OpenAI, and really when they launched ChatGPT and being able to put it on a mobile app that you could search and kind of use it like a consumer app, which we had already gotten used to using consumer apps, has really changed the game. And it's quite similar to the evolution you saw even with consumer banking, mobile banking, payment technologies, with people getting more comfortable with exchanging money through digital methods, even in the US. Because some of these technologies were adopted actually faster outside the US. Some things have been adopted inside the more developed economies faster. But now people see it as commonplace, and that enables the trust to build, and therefore also the business you can build off of a technology. Same as we did with mobile and many other things.
Do you think that this is, what is your view regarding AI native companies compared to companies that switching from non-AI native to incorporate AI? How is that different? How are the different models, and what do you think is going to be successful going forward?
So I think it's always an interesting question of what success looks like. And I'll tell you, like when I came out of Georgetown, I also started and did some of the first, the companies that we founded, and also we brought in some of the first private equity and venture capital investors. I did 2 IPOs in the 2000s. Then later I did take privates. So, so when you think about, people really understand now what an AI native company is. The first software technologies that really started taking off, whether they were architected as software as a service, meaning shared databases, which primarily happened in the US, or on-premise, like Oracle, SAP, and a lot of the European companies were, those were digitalizing paper-based processes. And I think what's interesting is it's taken, in my view, much, much longer than I ever expected for people to start thinking about software businesses moving away from paper-based processes, business processes in software, to thinking in a more AI native way that changes how you would ever consider a business process. And that's where the established companies, which are some of the biggest companies in the world, right? About 50% of our stock market capitalization, if you look at public companies, et cetera, SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, Microsoft, you name it, plus a legion of others. Those companies, despite the amount of ability to bring AI in and start thinking about all the data that they have, and fundamentally AI is about your data. For those of us who were statisticians or interested in data, AI was just a manifestation of how we look at data. And I think to the extent that I think has continued. But a lot of these big database companies, even though they had all the data, they weren't great at thinking about how to apply AI to the data. The AI native companies have turned that on its head, that they had very little data, actually. And that's partly why you had in Silicon Valley and elsewhere all these companies that originated of creating data before we had the ability to create what's now called synthetic data. So you had a lot of companies seeing the opportunity to build more tools and algorithms in a super dynamic way and be AI native. What is outside of Emburse, and we'll talk a little bit about how we had AI native components and also a lot of data and a lot of conventional software, how I tried to create the magic of bringing all this together in an exciting and interesting way. You haven't had a lot of leaders with enough expertise and maybe even desire to say, hey, what can we learn from the AI native companies with all the cool tools, but apply it to the data and the competency and also the customer trust. Your first question was about, say, consumer trust of AI more generally. when we are an enterprise software company, we're leveraging our customer trust in our enterprise products to adopt and buy new things, right? And AI is certainly a great new thing. And I think when you do it well, us having the trust and the understanding of the use cases, we can actually drive a lot of business value much faster for our customers when you understand all these different things. I think one of the big problems, and this will over time, I think, get married better together, is a lot of the leaders of the largest established companies are not AI natives themselves, and they're not really interested in AI. Like for me, again, coming from a girl in Wyoming and all this sort of stuff, I always thought this would change the world and was really exciting. But a lot of the leaders of the biggest companies and even the operating partners and a lot of the private equities and what have you, they don't think about AI. They understand AI will change the world, but they're not thinking about how they themselves use it to change who they are, their companies, and then drive the business value fast enough. They're delegating it. There's actually an interesting article that'll come out soon and that I wrote on how the CEO needs to be actually the chief AI officer. And it doesn't mean you know how to do all the coding, although coding in AI has gotten way easier. But you have to really understand how to leverage what you have in this intersection between AI native companies, which are primarily tooling, with the companies that have larger amounts of customers and data.
I think that so one thing that I think we should cover, like for Marne has a very cool demo about what Emburse can do. I know some of you may be familiar with what Emburse is, but maybe we can have the video start, and Marne, you can describe what Emburse is capable of doing right now and what are the features that it currently has.
Good, and I'll also talk a little bit about everything that's coming. So when we talk about innovation with AI, it's how we ourselves are changing what a software company is, as well as with our customers. So here we actually created both a foundational model, Gen AI-based foundational model, and then we also build out some specialized things. And we're also reimagining software in the era of AI. So here we're using agentic prompts, but already the workflow logic that we have. So for example, here, most customers, going back to what Dr. Rossi said, are used to engaging with like a ChatGPT type app. Okay, and the old chatbots weren't very great. Like now with agentic technology, as long as you have the core data, the NLP engines and everything are really good. So you could be engaging with it. And we already know in business software the rules. So in this case, we're doing travel and expense management. So we already know policies, we know traveler preferences, we know a lot about how to find fast the accurate information. So you can engage now through the NLP engine. We can return. Here we're starting with a travel-based trip versus some other sorts of purchase. So you're engaging with the various bookings. You can go through air bookings, hotel bookings, all this. For those of you who do this as digital natives, right, and some of you are of a generation, you're digital natives, others have to get embracing this more and more. We want to make it intuitive so that we already know the difficult stuff. We know what the company will pay. We know the preferred airlines. We know the booking rates with the suppliers of the airlines. That we know behind the scenes. So all we need the traveler to do is engage, is to book it. And then we want to flow in the expenses. This demo started with the premise that everybody hates doing expense reports, which I know Dr. Rossi does as well. So how do you never have to do an expense report again? Let's reimagine a world that all the data is there, right? You need data for audits and compliance and financial reporting, but how do you never need to do an expense report again? And how to use AI to also look behind the scenes around fraud, accuracy, compliancy, make sure that you're getting the correct receipt, also check for fraudulent receipts, all these sorts of things, and to really expedite it, that you're doing all of the compliance and accuracy checks seamlessly so that you also don't need people doing it. The reality is when you have clean data and smart companies and smart people, you can actually create an AI model that will be smarter than auditors. Okay, and you can do it. We showed you the mobile first. This is an example also of how we're changing the UI experience. So here, people have a variety of trips, etc. They're thinking about aggregating their reports. This might be after 10 trips that Dr. Rossi's gone on. And he wants to say, hey, can you consolidate my trips? Can you find my expense receipts, etc., etc. What's fascinating is we can actually do all of this with AI behind the scenes. But what we're finding with users, and this is something you might have heard about with explainable AI or where people want to interact with the AI, it builds also user confidence where they interact with it and can kind of confirm and see what the AI is doing. So what we found in user testing is to get the most efficiency, you want to do the maximum amount of work you can without user interaction. Because if all you do is recreate 10 interactions with a mouse prompt or whatever in the old way with 10 interactions with an agent, that's not really a great experience. But there also is a certain optimal way of humans engaging, right? It's even like those of you that like gaming or other sorts of things. Like to get the satisfaction out of the game or the interaction, you have to have these touch points. So what's fascinating is when you do AI really well, you can almost eliminate the human contact and interaction. But we've actually found that it builds trust and people see more value in having some interaction with AI. And they definitely want to understand also the data quality. So it's changing how we think about the data quality, analytics, etc. Another area that we're really revolutionizing and looking forward is around fintech and cards. So it's certainly not new to use AI in fraud. But we're starting to think about with the digital wallet, like B2B, business to business, are getting more used to using digital wallets. I'm sure most of you here are very used to using digital wallets, sending money. But in business to business interactions, also across border, using things like Apple Pay or digital wallets isn't as common. So what's interesting is certainly we're using AI for know your customer, we're using AI for anti-fraud, all this sort of stuff, expediting, looking at patterns. Like, hey, these are things like that we can prompt the users. What's fascinating and what's going next is actually looking at credit options and how you want to do more elastic credit, thinking about rebate structure, right? And this is something that you see even with dynamic tariffing. So think about how airplanes or other things might change rates for those of you looking for your flights, what have you. So there's a lot of interesting intersection of what I'd say core fintech use cases with AI, with also consumer patterns, and then how we're driving different adoption that's frankly been lacking around digital wallet. We're also looking at stable coins. And one of the things interesting with stable coins, and I'm sure all of you know about Bitcoin, et cetera, but you can start tracking digital wallets also for different fraud technologies. And then the question with the AI is how far back do you track it, right? And all of this fits into how we can start revolutionizing from an embedded card, wallet, payment structure more into the card and make it more seamless, which also changes how we can start aggregating data. One of the friction points that kind of is within the demo that I showed you is we actually now are moving faster in AI through our own systems than the data we're getting from credit card companies. So we often have to delay our processes. Here, we're all done there, but to give time for the credit card companies to catch up. So a lot of our discussions, and I have a big team at Money 2020, is working with the credit card companies and other to get faster. Here also is where those of you that travel a lot or interact with a lot of different apps, what's interesting to me is too many companies, whether they're AI native or not, are applying AI in fragmented ways. And a pain point is none of you like where you have to have 10 apps to do the same thing. Well, in our case, business travelers don't either. So, mobile isn't anything new, but there's still a lot of opportunity to power AI and mobile experiences in a more integrated way. And to do that, you're utilizing AI, of course, but you're also pulling in and aggregating more content sources. So content is another word for data, right? And even when you're having a really good model, and those of you who build out LLMs or what have you know the importance of data, but even when you have really good foundational data and what have you, you still need to be thinking about how you're aggregating that and driving it forward. And I think that gives a lot more business value, because a lot of the POCs or experiments that people are doing in AI are too fragmented, right? If you have a company or a person that already doesn't like 10 apps, a CIO that doesn't want to have 10 vendors, and then you say, hey, let's go do all these POCs and let's try and have all these things, it just creates a very high friction and not a very efficient experience. So the more we can aggregate it in Emburse, even across other third parties in an open ecosystem, but into our AI models, into our mobile apps, that of course creates a ton of value. So that's how you create value and do really cool things. What's behind the scenes of all this is, of course, we've brought in more AI tools into driving productivity of coders and product management, and that was a Figma video, et cetera. But it's also changing how we think about sales and marketing. Our marketing, something that's called LTV to CAC, long-term value of a customer acquisition cost. We can tune that a lot better now because we can evaluate with AI tools more the customers that are actually shopping versus maybe just casually looking, things like that, to really focus in on who we need to focus on. We're also looking in our customer base, how we look at customer health scoring. There's a company called Gainsight. It's a very well-known company, but the founder just semi-retired, and they're bringing in a new CEO, because I told him, how you built Gainsight has been a game changer the last 20 years, but what I actually need from you, you're not doing. You're not giving me enough insight into the propensity I need in my customers. We actually are going to create an AI model to aggregate the data across Salesforce and Gainsight and usage and all these other things, because we can now do it more accurately. So there's all these areas where we're testing tools, doing bake-offs. As we become more AI native ourselves and gaining capabilities, we're also using our own people to kind of test against other vendor solutions, and also to see if there are any cool ideas. I always say that imitation is sometimes the greatest form of flattery. There are times that we're seeing startups, right, still trying to get their first $1 million of revenue that have a really cool idea, and I'm like, oh, I can monetize that for 20 or 100 million because I have the customer base already. But you have to have people in management, like a CEO or someone else, that can understand an idea well enough to allocate resources to it. Because the age-old rule in business, you can't commercialize something you don't invest in, is still true. And that's where I think a lot of times the people that control the investment dollars aren't good enough at analyzing which projects really should succeed or fail in this era of experimentation.
So I have a question for you. So you have how much of so you are focusing on automating reimbursements, and this, I'm sure, saves an expense.
Yeah, you have AP automation as well, so invoice, and then from there we'll go into what's account receivable automation, and also innovating some things there.
And how much of, you have obviously tons of clients, but how much of in business in general, how much of the receipt is automated and how much is instead done by hand from people?
So this is also, of course, what's fascinating and goes back to your first question. So I always, and this is my lesson to all of you, okay, there are a ton of jobs out there that will be related to AI and digital skills, but they won't be requiring you to be a coder or you to be able to do vibe coding or whatever. But I mean, the world will be impacted by AI, but we all still need workers of all types that understand people, okay? And that's what is interesting, is that because I was worried about how our customers would feel about AI, we actually took what was a legacy OCR engine and replaced it with a Gen AI engine. And we told them, of course, we didn't lie about it, but we didn't make it a big deal, and we didn't charge separately, because actually we were paying so much for the legacy OCR engine that we actually saved money when we went to the foundational, very efficient Gen AI model. So we got them using it, and the accuracy was getting better and better, and we started processing, millions of data points in like 200 countries and territories around the world. And it was so seamless, but yet almost like magic. We even called it Genius Scan. And suddenly they started using what was our foundational LLM, and it just was like magic through the mobile app, and we also partnered it with the mobile app rollout. And then from now, we're starting to bring in more AI services based on that we'll charge for separately. But those we're targeting more to kind of taking efficiencies away from audit teams or reducing fraud, or even where they implemented the software one way and they've changed their processes and they should be looking at different things. So that will market and price more, I'd say, to direct human productivity, because it's more of a product that removes the need to audit. Because with AI, you also can bring more workflows into real time. Because remember, data is like water. Okay, let's all say a prayer for Jamaica, speaking of water. But data is like water. So you want to be managing the data in as much as real time. You want to understand what you can do with it. You're getting feedback from the LLM. You're also training the LLM. You can think about the analytics, the insights, everything in real time. Most of conventional software and kind of how people think, the processes are too clunky. Like they do something, then they audit it, then they think about it, then they come back. Like that's not a very efficient process, and it's also a low productivity process. So to the extent you can use AI to interact with the data and the people in real time, we're not only trying to automate the expense report, we're actually trying to do away with it, that everything has been checked and analyzed, that it just flows through to reimbursement. And we're getting to what we like to call the Emburse guarantee, where you effectively have zero fraud. And that also applies to payments. I don't know if some of you have looked at kind of hacker statistics and what have you, but payment fraud is a huge problem still today. And when you think about, there's more than $150 trillion that circulates around the world. And every time a request to pay leaves kind of a core system, you have a chance of fraud, right? So to the extent that we can bring more and more of that into a seamless real-time system, and also, frankly, it makes us more money to put it through our payment rails versus sending it to a bank to pay and things like that. All that fits together.
I see. And so you have a very interesting research that you pushed out, where you interviewed 1,500, so you surveyed 1,500 finance professionals, and trying to understand how they operate, how their company operates, how much automation they have. So what was the purpose of this survey? What were the main findings that you had?
So I was a little depressed by the survey, but not surprised, and I'll explain why. So, going back when I was founding these telco companies, and in the 90s and early 2000s, and we were setting up the finance departments, and telco, if you think about the traffic modeling and what it can do, is pretty sophisticated, right? So when you think about what we were doing with consumers, I'm like, woohoo, right at the cutting edge of technology. But when you look at what the finance teams and even how we were setting up a conventional general ledger accounting and, collections and, billing and all this sort of stuff, from, I swear, 1998 to now, it's almost the same process, okay? And I, customers were telling us this when I was talking to them, because I also think from where we go here in Emburse, frankly, I'm waiting to revolutionize ERP and even treasury management and all these other things that are frankly too stagnant. So when we did the study, we went out, and it was fascinating that about 3/4 of the finance teams were aware of AI projects, that they had a role in funding, only about 15% actually had AI products or AI projects that impacted their business processes in finance. And I can tell you, I've worked in AI across many, many different industries. To do a good job in finance, you have very clean data. Otherwise, you won't get through an audit and you have trouble, et cetera. So it was fascinating to me, this disconnect between groups with very clean data, like these were high-performing finance groups who were getting clean audits and things like that, with companies and finance teams that were quite willing to fund AI. Per your point at the beginning, they had gotten over the resistance of not doing anything with AI. They said, I want to partake in AI. But then they weren't actually thinking about how they could change what they do. So what I realized from that study is, thinking back kind of when I was a kid and you believed in magic or Santa Claus or something else, we almost have to allow them to think it's magic how we're bringing the process change to them, right? And that's partly what you saw in the demos and how we're thinking about a more autonomous experience, that we're bridging it to what most of us are used to in our lives, interacting with, right? Or seeing on TV or some of the consumer apps, with making it follow a process that people can get behind and trust in finance departments, so that they still have the reporting, the audit, they can go do the sampling, like whatever they feel they need to do to make sure the accuracy is there. But we're helping them to learn a different way. Because what I realized, and this is something, if I had ever done a PhD, besides, I've always been fascinated with AI, but behavioral economics is my other area of fascination, other than we'll see if dark matter ever gets solved. But I think, a lot of people aren't continually reinventing themselves, okay? And AI now gives us so much information. Like, we had a few extra minutes before, so we were trying to stump ChatGPT with questions it didn't really know the answer to, and it doesn't know which ancient civilization was actually the best at mathematics. If you want to know, that was the question we stumped it with before we came. But people aren't great at changing, okay? Because most people learn what they learn, and then they stick to what they learn. And in this era of AI, I'll say, for all of you, and my advice to you, is there's going to be all sorts of jobs that you will be able to apply AI to, and if any doubt, you can go sell or in pre-sales. How many of you even know what pre-sales is in a software company? Okay, one. That's pretty, okay, we'll talk about pre-sales in a moment. But I think, I just realized that we have a duty of marrying these things into Office of the CFO. That's partly why I came to Emburse, part of what I'm so passionate about, that we need to be showing finance teams how they can change. And part of the reason I came to Emburse versus doing, a full stack ERP, which I did work at before, is nobody loves doing expense reports. You don't love it, no one loves it. So because people don't love doing it, it's easier, they're more willing to change, right? They're like, but if it's something that they kind of love doing, and this is what came out in the research too, is that people who are hired as auditors, a lot of them are afraid that their job's going to change. But when you say to them, look, you're working too many hours, you can't hire enough auditors, why don't you instead keep the people you have and do a better job of sampling, as you need to and being more effective? This is how you use AI to have higher productivity and be more effective. They're like, oh, okay, I can understand that. So I really try to make software that doesn't require complicated change management, almost seems like magic, which AI makes it easier to do, but also make it easier for people to change. The neuroplasticity of change, I think, all of you are here learning, so you're already part of a learning culture, but a lot of people that we found in this study and generally, they think because they're good at their job, they don't need to learn new things. And for AI to really give the gains it needs to gain, you have to be willing to evolve your business process and take a fresh look at your business.
So what was in that report? I found interesting this result, I think you found that 75% of the companies says that AI exceeded that ROI expectations, but at the same time, there didn't seem to be a lot of effort from the company's perspective to retrain their employees and most of them were actually expecting the employees to self-learn some of these tools. And why do you think that is? Is that there is no infrastructure, they've never thought about retraining, or is it something fundamentally different?
Yeah, I think it's all these things. So, there's a concept of bias and principal agent. So when the 75% success thing got flagged, I thought that whoever got authorization for POCs did a pretty good job of picking and knowing the success criteria to game the system to get most of the 3/4 successful. Okay, so I rated the people that were kind of choosing the AI POCs gold star, check. Okay, you correctly assessed where AI could drive productivity and be successful. Okay, that's important. What is lacking, and this is why I actually wrote this article on why the CEO needs to be the chief AI officer, is there's a huge amount of work to roll out a POC of anything, let alone AI, to an entire workforce. Okay, that takes a lot of selling, it takes a lot of pushing, it takes a lot of encouragement. And training is only part of that. I think, I'll tell you, you all can comment on how well you learn and listen. Once you've actually taken the test and hopefully aced your test, what are the things, I can tell you the things that I kind of remember from 30 years post my studies and the things I've forgotten. But people aren't also good at retaining training. So not only most organizations don't trust themselves to do good training, a lot of people aren't good at remembering the training. So this is where I think it's really important that you make the software and the AI-enabled processes so easy that you need to make them accessible, you need to be doing the teaching, but then people have the confidence and the interaction and it grows. And that's really what we anchored our new Reimagine experience on, with people already getting used to the OCR. They were already used to kind of taking a photo of something, and then we're just applying Gen AI. So if you can bridge it, and I really think a lot of the people that are driving the change, besides not being great educators, so they can learn from established educators in a much better way, they're not good at the art of persuasion. So I think if I had advice for you beyond, of course, AI is changing the world, critical thinking skills, the art of leading, the art of persuasion, how you can articulate what are complex concepts into simpler things that people feel, oh, I can do that, right? As you probably know your favorite teachers, the ones that are so esoteric, you're like, oh my God, I can't even understand what someone's saying, that's hard to learn, right? So I think that is really a lot of these, even great companies no longer trust themselves to be educators. And you don't have enough of the people that have the art of persuasion and this to kind of champion some of these POCs that clearly they did a good job understanding the productivity where it was.
So I think the year of 2025 to me is the year of agentic AI. So it's a world where, once again, you went from having a chatbot giving you recommendation to being able to automate way more of your workflow. But of course, with that comes a lot of power, but also a lot of concerns related to how much do you want to have AI agents make autonomous decisions, and where do you draw the line, right? So you have that if I work with my own Claude code, I can give it access to my email, my read and write permissions on my hard drive. That doesn't, something that worries me a little bit. But of course, in an organization, that becomes very difficult. Yeah. And you are in a world where you have that you potentially could automate much more of the process, but of course, at the risk of losing control. And so how do you think about agentic AI within the firm and from your employees' perspective, and also for your end customers?
So the tools for agentic AI have gotten dramatically better, even in the last 12 months, and it's going like gangbusters now. I think we were talking about I don't know if you all know what MCP servers are. Okay, and the orchestration. So the actual tools, right, the cool tools that can look at data and do some agentic and manage prompts, you know, they've gotten really easy. Like, I remember getting some early agentic AI stuff back in 2015 and thinking it was super cool. Like, oh my God, those were like the equivalent of, you know, a fashion trend you don't want to bring back. Like, now the tools are so good. The question, though, that hasn't stayed up, because I think, again, we haven't had in some of these AI native companies the experience of scaling where you've really thought about administrative permissions, kind of how you all, okay, in clunky software, you know, when you're doing new versions, you sometimes used to have a rollback plan for those thinking of old days. You know, people aren't really also thinking about how do you have rollback plans, how do you have audit logs in agentic AI, et cetera. So I showed you some agentic use cases here. These are the first use cases that we think are really safe use cases. We're already pulling in the information with secure data. We already can control who sees what with the existing administration permissions we have, the rules that we already have in our software. We're just giving agents the ability to go look up data that could be done elsewhere, but doing it in a really efficient way. The same, where we have already authorized agents in kind of our existing operations within Emburse, is where they're doing things that kind of have a low risk, or a low risk of being wildly wrong, or like, you know, causing us a black swan event or whatever, right? So those, I think, are the easier use cases to start trusting at scale and testing against. We also, you know, we're using the more complex orchestrations now in our dev environments, but we're also having to figure out how to segregate data, how to control them, how to manage. If you have, you know, any AI native company will try and sell you on what they do, okay? That's how entrepreneurship works, and it can be as hard to get your first $1 million of revenue as getting the next 5 or 10 in some cases. So you have to remember that every entrepreneur, even if they have a brilliant idea, will be trying to sell you on what they do so that they can get money, keep their company alive, and get more use cases. What they're genuinely not good at, and this is where we at Emburse are taking a leading step in figuring out, and so are certain other forward-thinking companies, is how you start to blend the orchestration of agents, how you audit what the agents did in case they did things that you don't do, and then really how you control the risk. So it comes down to really risk tolerance, risk management, and how good your existing control structures are. So I'll also tell you, to get ready for us putting in some of these more complex orchestrated agents, we are tightening up from an architectural perspective kind of our data parameters, the administration parameters, how the old way of looking at it might interact with the agents, which agents can actually read the administrative parameters and understand them versus which ones can't. The ones that can't, we can't trust to kind of have rewrite access pretty much ever, right? So then we either have to go back to those entrepreneurs and say, hey, this is a critical failing, like super cool, but you're not. And to be fair, a lot of the companies that don't make this next evolution, yes, they'll be AI native, but they'll have flamed out like a lot of companies did in the .com crisis and elsewhere because they can't scale. And, you know, it's interesting that I often say that, you know, what can go up really fast can go down really fast. And you definitely see these interesting Silicon Valley companies that might have 20 million or 100 million. But going back to what I said about competitive advantage, like, are they going to be able to hold the advantage? Are they going to be able to mature into the more complex use cases that are, you know, more risk of failure, more risk of bad actors and things? Because, you know, you certainly don't want people exposing. And even there, we were fast movers in AI, but we were really careful. Like, we went and negotiated with OpenAI that how we use it, they're not actually taking our customer data. Because what was fascinating I saw is a lot of the early users that were using OpenAI, in Europe, they didn't realize it was violating GDPR. They didn't realize that the information being plugged in was public, right? So they just weren't smart about it. And you do see that with agentic AI right now. Like even like MasterCard, who's a partner of ours, we issue MasterCards in some cases. They sent a super cool agentic AI, and I'm meeting with them in about a month. I messaged them back, how are you handling the MCP servers for all this? And I got a fluffy answer. They're still working through it too. So a lot of these that you'll see, they're still working through behind the scenes, even though, again, the agentic tools are getting more and more amazing.
And so in terms of, if you had to, and by the way, if people have questions, please raise your hand because, yeah. Over here, Gabe. But in the meantime, I just want to ask you, if you had to guess which new entrants are going to enter this space, do you think it's going to be established players that maybe kind of are already in the corporate world, or startups?
So, it's what's interesting, and I hope all of you are curious and stay curious. Okay, I always say that there's 3 reasons for my success. 1, I am really good at leading people to do complex and hard things in a making work fun and really solving the challenge, but also that intersection of, hey, this is hard, we're going to figure it out, and we'll keep iterating it. I talk about how we place bets and a series of hypotheses. So that is a really important skill to have as the pace of innovation and change accelerates, okay? And this actually goes back to why a lot of the finance departments, most finance people I don't think are naturally that great at it, right? So the data doesn't lie. Second is staying curious, okay? And then again, part of being curious at scale means problem solving. So to answer your question, I think a lot of the people that are at a senior level like me, I don't know very many CEOs as curious at my experience and years in the industry anymore, okay? And that always saddens me, but I think that is a little bit the reality, whether they're a bit burned out, whether they already felt they did what they did, maybe they were never curious, I don't know. But I think we need more people who are curious in established companies, because that matches with the learning culture, it matches with putting in the time to problem solve as you scale. So for established companies who have the money and the customers, I think it's actually, sadly to say, more of a people problem than a technology and money problem. For the AI native companies, and I've seen this my entire career, that often the best people sometimes couldn't also evolve, right? Learn new things, evolve past what they were good or bad at. But also, like, sometimes the greatest, interesting, most companies either wouldn't sell to a partner or couldn't get enough customers to just stay in business. Or sometimes they took a big payout to the company that would pay the most for them, but pretty much killed the product off of. Like, I can think of so many companies that were amazingly cool companies that were bought by the giants, and they effectively just killed off, because in the management committee of these giant companies with 20 billion of revenue, even if they spent, $1 billion on this acquisition, they didn't really care about it, right? And they didn't care enough to keep the experts who, most of the young entrepreneurs that are doing game-changing things are kind of idealistic. So for me, I often say that I have to be a bridge between the founders and the people that are doing cutting-edge things with the regular business world, because otherwise they get burned out and frustrated. And frankly, to some degree, some of you, when you go into work and you learn new companies and people, okay, definitely I hope you have good supportive cultures and colleagues and all this sort of stuff. But, as you learn things, there's going to be times that are more difficult, times that are easy, right? So you have to think about the resiliency. And the AI native companies that will continue to succeed will have, it's almost like, why do we have life on Earth? Because you had early organisms that had the stepping stones and then humans and other things, right? But you have to have that combination of factors to create kind of, life in these new technology for them to survive and have a chance to change the world. And often that can waste money. I mean, OpenAI, for all that it's truly amazing and has made game-changing technology, has wasted billions of dollars. Like, you don't often have companies that can afford to waste billions of dollars either. Like, that really is a rare thing. All right.
Just a quick note, please state your name and if you're a student in the program you're in.
Jiawei Li, I'm not a student here, but thank you very much for being here. So the question about what you said about a company can go out very fast, can also come down very fast. So in the world of AI, how can a company actually build its moat, either for native AI or non-native AI? So I see the apps you're doing. So if some other company just plug into the API of OpenAI or ChatGPT, can they do the same thing? I just see so many similar apps that can do the same thing that are coming up. I just want to understand your view on the moats that the company can create in this situation. Thank you.
100%. Yeah, great question. And I think this is frankly why after the CEO job I'll go do some more, because that is actually the heart of it, and why frankly I'll stay in demand as a CEO, because bridging this. So, OpenAI made AI accessible, right? And for that, they, will always have a very important role in AI and the history of AI and where it goes forward. They almost made certain things too easy. Okay, it's where companies won't use OpenAI is because they don't want to give their data to OpenAI for training. Okay, so first off, we talk a lot about secure, proprietary, we don't sell our customers' data. And at least in the enterprise space or for knowledgeable business customers, that is super important to them, okay? On the related side, we already hold and are trusted to hold with all the PCI and gazillion certifications, and frankly, a lot of money we spend on cybersecurity, a ton of our customers' data, okay? So I'll get to a follow-on point in a second on the monetization of AI that I think ties into this. There's also aspects, and I pick software industries that have complexity of workflows and rules that aren't easy to duplicate. So for example, there's an AI native little startup that wanted to buy us for $40 million, the founders. And I was like, look, you're doing cool stuff, but that's like ludicrous because, I can go duplicate what you're doing for $1 million of technology investment with some few clever people. And I already have the data and I understand the complex policies, because what you saw there that I mentioned, the agents, we understand how to do per diems. How many of you know that Austria has 900 per diems? Okay, when you look at global per diems, all the global rules around reimbursements, payables, compliance, OpenAI does not understand the global rules and compliance, okay? So here, the opportunity for us and how you create this moat is the domain expertise around complex software processes married then with the technology. And certainly you can use OpenAI, Claude, I think they, to up level, to speed along things, but you have to do it in a way that you can still preserve kind of the fundamental value props of production of the data. I'll say that I have commercialized all sorts of technology and AI in many different ways. So you have a lot of people talking about not just what does AI mean if I want to go into sales or pre-sales or be an engineer or whatever, but also thinking about how you monetize AI. And that, to be fair, isn't that different from how we thought about monetizing data, because ultimately, if you have the data, there's so many AI tools now, and even how people are thinking about open source versus other paid AI tools, there's gazillion AI tools. There's more AI tools than we actually need. Okay, there maybe are more car models than people need, and maybe that's why we're seeing issues in the car industry as well now. But I can tell you we're getting to a point, there's more AI models, agentic and otherwise, than we kind of need from a generic model perspective. That's why I think you'll see acceleration of purpose-built models, things like that. But over time, if you fast forward 3 to 5 years, and I'm already thinking this through, and this is what's important for the conversion of AI native companies to survive 5 to 10 years versus 2 to 3 years. They may get bought and exit in 2 to 3 years, so they don't care. Remember that a lot of founders only really care about selling their company and being a serial entrepreneur. So as long as they get the sale of their company, they get the money in their bank account, they don't really care what happens after. Not all of them, but I'll tell you quite a few. But the ones that really think about what's going to have durable value, there, my question is, I think it's quite possible that the commercial ubiquitous AI models that don't have a moat will become commoditized. And then you're really going to be monetizing like the olden days off of data and just how you're applying the AI tooling on top, the secure proprietary data. And that's why it's really important as we build out agentic framework is that we really think truly about how we handle in an agentic world with the prompts and orchestration, everything that has the fundamental security of the data and administrations and the use cases.
What question there?
Hello. Thank you. I wanted to ask a question that you mentioned earlier on in your. Oh yeah, sorry. My name is Will. I'm actually a student at the LLM school. I'm an attorney, and I'm in the legal space. And one of the things you mentioned early.
We have a ton of legal customers. We have 90% of the top 100 law firms.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. It's expense reports are the bane of many lawyers'
And all the matter numbers and how you route it. Actually, Gen AI has improved that dramatically from all the manual routing.
I'm sure it is. But one question I thought was very interesting was, or what point you made was how much easier it is to, not just use AI, but actually help build AI without a heavy code background. Mm-hmm. One thing I noticed in the legal space is there's a lot of people with a lot of great knowledge who don't, who can automate a big part of what they do on a regular basis, but don't really know where to start with the automation process because they never learned how to code. And I'm curious to know kind of, in your experience, like how you help kind of people in your team, take their ideas and put them into an automated format without having, when they're in a low code or no code background?
So, great question, and I think it's a very relevant one because this is, the same thing that I talked about, like critical thinking, leadership skills. What makes us human will actually, in my opinion, be even more prized in an AI world because we will be teaching society and businesses to change even more. Okay, and I'll say that over my career, I've been shocked that, even why I think, I don't know, do people know what RPA is? Okay, it was interesting to me when RPA came out, process automation tools, that, it was big hype, like that was the first hype, the RPA hype, right? And I think there are some lessons to the AI hype cycle of thinking about the RPA hype cycle, because a lot of people aren't good at, there's not enough people in most companies that are good at thinking about automation and process improvement. It was funny, like I made a joke the other day about, documentation and this and that's a bit like exercise. It's important, you got to do it, but who likes it, right? And I think, I've been kind of the weirdo that just I'm curious and problem solve all the time. Like I can't really shut it off. And sometimes people find that exhausting and, then I just give them like a holiday from me or whatever till they're ready again. But, first off, you have to have enough continuous problem solvers and you have to have leadership. And I think a lot of the law firms, I've worked with a lot of great lawyers and very senior law firms, even beyond customers like we've used. Your senior partner is not really thinking about, how do I automate this? They're thinking about billable hours and customers and, things like this. So we have to be training all of these businesses that you have to get people with the neuroplasticity to be thinking, to be better problem solvers, to be curious and better problem solvers. That's the first thing. So we have to be, and I talk this all the time, that we have to be teaching people to qualify and look at aptitudes in their people differently. Do they have neuroplasticity? Are they curious? Are they problem solvers? If you have that, then per your point, you'll think about, look, what are the clunky processes everybody hates to do? I came to a company with things that people hate to do, so it's easier to show them a way, okay? What's been interesting to me is that a lot of these businesses could have been well more advanced in their processes than they are. And that's part of why I came to Emburse, because I think this is ridiculous. Like, we need to move this industry along. Because you don't have enough problem solvers that were like, hey, this is a stupid process. Why are we doing it this way? And then be able to say, look, this is a better way. And this happens all the time, even as we're now reinventing businesses with our customers. We'll go to them all the time. And even they're happy customers that'll say, hey, I set it up this way. They don't even remember why they set it up that way. The person who set it up is long gone. And often people won't have the courage to ask, why did you set it up this way? And sometimes the fix won't even be AI. I also think that not enough people are data-minded, from a statistics, economic finance, like what's the ROI? Going back to the whole point of this, what's the ROI of what we're doing? What's the ROI of this process? And then, you can apply AI to a lot of these processes now in ways you never could. RPA was kind of clunky. But, there's other things you don't want to apply AI to because, hey, there's a fix you don't even need to apply AI to. But if people are never curious and they can't articulate the why, they can't get support for the why, that's actually what's holding back even getting to the first step before they get to AI. So we have to make it easy enough that even the people that will never find the destination, the finance teams that will never find the way, like they'll just go in circles all the time, we're saying, hey, here's the way, and that's partly what we're trying to show in the demo and partly what we're doing. And I think the companies that are establishment companies that reinvent themselves to be successful, they have to figure that out. The companies that are AI native that become the next giants in the industry, they have to have people that care enough about this to stay for 10 to 20 years, not just take a paycheck. Because there's so much liquidity now in this area. And, even when you do some things really good, it's like, I was quite a good athlete. When I came here, they were going to let me walk on the Georgetown. I'd already had ACL reconstruction on one knee, but they were like, sure, you can play basketball, but there's no money. We're not giving. This is before Title IX, and frankly, female athletes don't get paid very much anyway. So I was much better having a regular career than trying to play basketball. But it's just interesting that you have to find the routes to value. And this, I want to go back to the point that AI is technology, but it's also a business opportunity. And all of you need to find in your personal lives how you make AI as a business opportunity work for you. And part of that will be about embracing AI and the digital things that come from it in the future. We'll wait for quantum computing at Seltzer. But it's also how you retain the curiosity and the problem solving, the critical thinking skills that, even if you're not bringing in AI processes, you're bringing positive change to organizations that help them grow more profitably, accomplish things, retain customers, whatever the metrics for success are.
We have time for one last question.
Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Audrey, and I'm a senior and undergrad in the MSB. One thing I've noticed is that AI has really lowered the barrier to entry for entrepreneurship. So we're seeing a huge rise in solopreneurs, small businesses, and we're also seeing enterprise reduce their headcount. So I'm curious, how is Emburse positioning itself for this changing landscape and embracing the business opportunity that is smaller teams?
So a couple things, and I actually also related to women. I grew up in a very male-dominated patriarchal culture. Then I went and worked, actually, believe it or not, in Venezuela in 1996, 97, all around the world, including Saudi Arabia and China, Japan, you name it. And what took me everywhere around the world was that I found ways to do business. Sorry, I talked too much without drinking water. And I think you've always had what I called cottage industries. And, since you're a woman, I'll make this point about being a woman, that when we invested in female entrepreneurs, actually, the success rates were quite good, whether it was AI or not. But they often had trouble getting the second rounds of funding and the ongoing funding versus like creating a little like service business or kind of, something local. We're seeing some of those trends generally across men and women, also with women in AI. So we have to create a better way of finding the emerging AI native businesses that are worthy of support and scaling. And that's something that happens in a bigger picture outside of what I can oversee here at Emburse. I'll talk to you a little bit about how I've handled it here at Emburse. But we need to create an ecosystem, kind of how we look at great talent around the world, for finding these businesses that really need the help to grow and go from kind of a cottage industry, whether it's, a crafts business that used to go on Shopify or Amazon, or an AI business, like that sort of creative like destruction and helping them to grow and develop is as relevant in commerce generally as it is in AI, and even what you do in other industries as a founder and entrepreneur is going to be AI impacted. Here, we did, here in general, and again, I've made more money working in private equity. I'm very experienced now. I'm considered a private equity operator is the word they use. So there's certain things that you do to make businesses more productive. You don't have extra management just sitting around. If you buy 5 to 10 companies, you think about how you combine finance teams and HR teams and, rationalize it, et cetera. So a lot of the fundamentals on how you think about what an efficient business is from a metrics perspective hasn't really changed, and what I would say is a quality business. It's the same when you think about customer revenue. We're trying to create, good customer health, customers that renew, customers that grow. There's something called gross retention, net retention, et cetera, et cetera. When you think about, when I came into Emburse, I had a little bit of what I called cleanup to kind of really look at who are the people that are going to power this business forward, okay? And I really didn't look at AI skills at that point. This was in early 2024. I looked at people that either were complacent, like we had some people that were acting like they were in a nonprofit, like they weren't passionate about customers, they weren't passionate about the industry, they weren't passionate about the opportunity that we had. So we could teach them AI skills. We created an AI Avengers program. We started testing different tools. All of that we've taught a ton. But we had to find the people that still had the passion for what we were doing. Okay, so we went around in that, and we did do some synergies and things like that. What mainly we've done since is we've been able to grow the company very efficiently by not adding as many people as we've grown, okay? And that is partly AI, but a lot of people are kind of lazy ascribing everything to AI because it's like the buzzword. It was like when people wanted to right-size a business and they pick whatever thing that's happening and that's their excuse. I mean, even Amazon laying off a bunch of middle managers, I think their middle management got bloated. It really has nothing to do with AI. If they put robots in their picking warehouses, okay, that's to deal with robotic automation versus people doing picking. So I think that will also come. But it's more for us as a profitable growing business is we want to bring in AI tools to make our people smarter and to be more efficient, okay? I think, in a functioning business where the people are not just the main thing you spend money on, but the critical source of your competitive differentiation, because people are, as I said before, even more important than AI. When AI is more likely to get commoditized, which you will start to see a commoditization. And in some cases, you'll see commoditization before monetization. And that's going to be the race for a lot of these AI-based native companies and entrepreneurs, is that their product will be commoditized before they can actually monetize it. People will remain the secret sauce. And that's where you're driving the new use cases, like how you get customers to adopt it, how you get more, legal firms to change, right? And it's that persuasion skills that will be even more important, understanding what is possible with technology, right? And that's where, even thinking about the principle of this whole conversation we had, the return on investment of AI, you can have a return on investment of intelligence or, whatever. There's other things, say, in a defense perspective that ROI might be measured differently. But traditionally, ROI of AI comes really from reducing fraud and bad actors. Okay, that covers payments, cybersecurity, I guess intelligence as well. Human productivity. Okay, so making people work better, faster. And frankly, I say all the time, I would rather have people that can do 80 hours of work in 35 hours and be super happy and have fun and not burn out than trying to get people in an old way to work 80 hours and burn out. Okay, that's not a good recipe for success. I'd much rather use AI so that our people can work 35, 38, whatever hours and have a great life than saying, hey, it's just overwhelmed. And then the third is really, how do we understand our customers better, their needs, their wants? Because a lot of times customers won't necessarily be honest with you, or it's hard to decipher that through conventional means, right? Even if you're a really good listener, it's the old telephone game, right? I don't know, but how often do you really understand what someone's trying to tell you? And then, cross-culturally, what have you, they also might not be honest with you. And I think, going to your point also on scaling the AI native and entrepreneur and founders, you need that honesty and that feedback and being able to evaluate to scale and be successful beyond kind of an early success.
This note, I would like to take a moment to thank Marne. Please join me in